Magicka DK. Okay, let's get these guys.
Hello guys, and welcome to my Magicka Warden build. If you guys don't know, Warden is the new class that was introduced with the Morrowind update, and it is a requirement to have the Morrowind update if you want to play this class. So, that aside, welcome to the build, guys. This is a very high damage, very large damage shield Magicka Warden. The way this build works is we focus a lot on stacking that maximum Magicka value as high as we can. So, this is an interesting build. On top of it, this build has excellent survivability, and it has incredible AoE burst damage. It has some of the best AoE burst damage out of all the classes in the game. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and let's jump right into it. Let's take a look at our first stat page here. So we are fully unbuffed right now. We don't have any of our buffs up. We're coming in at 46k Magicka. Now we are running Necropotence, so I'm just going to summon the pet up so we at least get the pet buff for you guys. So 51.4k Magicka on this build, guys. Absolute incredible max Magicka value. So this is also without my Undaunted passives. I don't have my Undaunted passives on the Warden, as it did just come out in pre-release. So this is a really high maximum Magicka value. The reason we have it so high is because we're going to be relying big time on those big damage shields to stay alive. We've got very large damage shields on this build, so let's keep moving on. We've got 20.1k HP. The HP is not so bad, guys. Of course, with some Undaunted passives, that'll go up. 12.5k stamina. Also missing the Undaunted passive, so we'll be looking at about 14k stam on this build as well. The recoveries are coming in pretty great, too. Just about 1,400 unbuffed Magicka recovery and just about 800 unbuffed stamina recovery. So we've got some pretty good sustain on this build as well, guys. Our spell damage buffed is sitting at around 2,500, and then buffed crit at 42%. Our physical and spell resistance are very low, and we're not using a buff to buff them. We also have very little crit resist. Like I said, guys, this is a damage shield based build, so it's not really useful for us to dump too much into physical, spell, or crit resistance. And finally, guys, the Mundus we're using on the build is the Mage. For food, we are using Witch Mother's Potent Brew, and due to the fact that Warden actually has an easy time getting access to all of the buffs that it needs for this build, it is totally up to you what potions you want to use. I've been using tripods on the build, and I found them absolutely incredible for it. As for race, guys, since this is a Magicka build, I would recommend High Elf as the main race for it. The reason I say High Elf is because High Elf gets the best max Magicka stats from a DPS perspective. Dark Elf is also an excellent option, very similar to High Elf, just a little bit weaker in the max Magicka department. And then Breton is also an excellent option for this build too, guys. Let's take a look at the gear we're wearing. So here it is. We got a 5-piece Shackle Breaker on. This is one of the new crafted sets that ZeniMax added with the Morrowind update. So this is a really cool set because it gives you both Magicka and stamina kind of sustain and damage, which is interesting. Now, I find this to be a very good set for a Magicka, stamina, or a hybrid build. This is actually like just an all-around awesome set. So what it's doing for our build here is it's giving us that max Magicka value, giving us some Magicka recovery, giving us the stam recovery, as well as some spell damage. Now, the maximum stamina value is also really useful because it's going to give us more room in our stam pools to keep our resources up so we don't run out of stamina as fast. We can do more roll dodges, we can do more break freeze, etc. So this is a great all-around set, I think, for pretty much any build. So I decided to pair it with, or put it on this build here. The next set that we're running, as you guys, as I mentioned earlier, is Necropotence. This is going to give us the bulk of that max Magicka that this build has. So much max Magicka coming out of here. Very strong set, and of course, summoning the Betty Netch will get your Necropotence set to proc. So the Betty Netch not only will increase your spell damage, but on top of it, it'll proc your Necropotence, increasing your max Magicka as well. For the weapons, guys, they're part of my Shackle Breaker set. I went Sharpened on my Inferno Staff, and then I went for Infused on my Restoration Staff. So we're doing Fire Staff and a Resto Staff. Sharpened, of course, being the best damage trait. We went with Oblivion damage as well for the enchant on here, because the Oblivion damage is completely unmitigated in PvP. And then finally, we've got the Infused Weapon. This is going to increase our spell damage by another 500 or so every time we bust out our Resto Staff for a lighter heavy attack. And as you always should be weaving, you should have this buff up quite often. So this will push our maximum spell damage value to actually around 3k instead of 2,500 when we have this buff up. And then finally, guys, the last piece that I'm wearing is the Elambris one piece. So this is just for a little bit more Max Magicka. Like I said, guys, this build revolves around stacking Max Magicka as high as possible. We've got a guy dancing in the background. He's got a little Warden hat on too. Very nice. So there you have it. For the gear itself, the traits I would recommend for your hat, legs, and chest, go for Infused and Max Magicka enchants on that. That's going to give you more of that Max Magicka. And then for the gear itself, I say well fitted. Now, I know that Impen can sometimes be a good option, but because we have such massive damage shields on this build, I really feel like well fitted's the better way to go. You're kind of putting less pressure on your stamina pool. You're able to sprint and roll dodge more. Warden also has access to Major Expedition, so you are pretty mobile on this Magicka build. So I think that well fitted pairs really well with that. I do have Impen on the Elambris. I would preferably run 4 well-fitted on my small pieces if I had the appropriate gear. Now, obviously, you want to do 5 light armor, 1 medium, and 1 heavy to take advantage of our Undaunted passives to push that Max Magicka as high as possible. That being said, guys, I'm missing the Undaunted passives, so it doesn't really matter that I'm doing 5-1-1 right now. And finally, guys, the enchants that we have on our rings and necklaces is going to be all spell damage. If you really feel like you're hurting for sustain on this build, feel free to take one of these spell damage off and replace it with either cost reduction or increased regen, whichever one you'd prefer to use. But it's really up to you. I think running 3 spell damage works just fine, though. Okay, guys, so let's take a look at our Destro staff bar to start. So this is our fire staff bar here. This is your offensive bar on this build. Now, like I said, this build hits really hard. It's a very high damage build. So don't be surprised by these tooltip values, even though they're unbuffed. So let's begin. The first ability we have is Force Pulse. Now, Force Pulse is a great skill. It does more damage than Force Shock, as you can see the difference in the tooltips here. It's almost, at the higher ends of the tooltips, we're looking at about 600 or 700 more damage for going for Force Pulse over Crushing Shock. So there you see, it's actually quite a little bit of a damage difference. Now, Crushing Shock is awesome because it'll interrupt people who are casting, which is great for PvP. So this one's really up to you guys. I like Force Pulse more because it hits so damn hard. We have a really deadly burst combo on this build, and you guys are going to see a lot of it when we get to the gameplay footage. So Force Pulse is important for that burst combo to add as much outgoing damage as we possibly can. On top of it, we are running the Warden Northern Storm Ultimate. So this ultimate will apply chill to things when we use it. To anyone that comes close to us, so they might get chilled by the ultimate. That will proc our Force Pulse special ability, where up to 2 nearby enemies will take magic damage if they're already afflicted with the chilled. So there you have it, guys. Very strong single target attack to begin with here. The next ability we have on the bar, guys, is Screaming Cliff Racer. Now, the reason that we have 2 single target spammables is because Screaming Cliff Racer actually has a little bit of a delay before it hits its target. So the way that we lined up Screaming Cliff Racer is we're going to use it in a combination with other skills so it all lands at about the same time. Of course, this ability will deal a little bit extra damage at long range, so it gives you some serious range bursts with this build as well. The next ability we have is Dampen Magic. This is your most powerful defensive utility on this build. As I said, guys, we are stacking Max Magicka on the Warden, and as you guys know, that Max Magicka value is the only thing that determines how big your shield will be. So the bigger your Max Magicka is, the bigger your damage shield is. We're coming in at a nice, beefy 9.6k tooltip. Let's buff up real quick with all our Max Magicka. 10.6k tooltip, so almost a 14k Dampen Magic in PvP, guys. I am standing in PvP right now, so this is a really big damage shield. And it has some other special effects through our Warden healing skills, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. The next ability we have is Inner Light. This is on the bar for Major Prophecy, giving us that Major Prophecy buff on our offensive bar. And then finally, a 5% bonus to our Max Magicka. This is really important. We're playing the Max Magicka game with the Warden, so we want to have as many of these percent bonuses as we can on the build. On top of it, this is nice to have as a little bit of stealth detection if you're fighting a Nightblade. That can come in real handy. The next ability we have is Deep Fissure. This is such a powerful Warden ability. Stir up a group of Shulk that attack after 3 seconds, dealing 13k magic damage to enemies in front of you. This is a 20 by 7 meter area. Very, very large AoE burst ability here. Now, it is on a 3-second cooldown, so I would compare this ability to like a really powerful proxy detonation that has much less of a wait time on it. It's a very strong skill, and I'll show you guys how it works here. So as you can see, it works really well for any kind of a burst build because you can set this first, follow with your Screaming Cliff Racer, and then finally the instant damage Force Pulse for a massive combo on an enemy. On top of it, this AoE will also stun one enemy that it hits for 3 seconds. So this is actually the only stun that I have on this build. It can be a little tricky to aim this ability, but with a little bit of practice, you can get used to it, and you can learn to aim it. But it does take a bit of practice, so play around with Deep Fissure on your Warden, guys. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to before you can reliably stun stuff with it. The next ability we have is Northern Storm. This is the ultimate that we slotted here through our Winter's Embrace tree. This is a pretty powerful ultimate. The damage on it is just coming up to about 5k here. If we compare that to our Destro Staff ultimate, it's coming in at almost 8k. So it's about 30 to 40% weaker than the Destro ultimate. It lasts 1 second longer, but it snares everything that I touch by 70%. So this works a lot like Eye of the Storm. When I cast this ultimate, it's on me and it moves around with me. On top of it, this ultimate will also grant me major protection, reducing my incoming damage by 30%. This also affects my damage shields, so this makes my damage shields even more powerful, 30% stronger, and I already have such a big damage shield to begin with, so this works really well with it. And then finally, slotting Northern Storm is also going to increase my max magicka by another 8%. So between Northern Storm and Inner Light, I have a 15% bonus to my max magicka, 5% from Inner Light, 2% from Mage's Guild, and then finally the 8% off Northern Storm. So that's how we're getting such a huge max magicka value on our Destro Staff bar. So let's take a look at our Resto Staff bar. This is more of our support, sustain, and stay alive bar. There's some great utility skills on here as well. So let's run through it, guys. The first ability we have here is Regeneration. Now, that's not actually the skill that you should use for this build. I should be using Healing Ward, but as you can see, this is a brand spanking new Warden, and I don't have 20 Resto Staff on it yet because I just haven't got around to leveling it up. So I've actually been playing this build without Healing Ward, which is kind of like a really big deal of a heal. It's an excellent save yourself from dying heal. And I've been playing it without Healing Ward with a lot of success, so I'm really excited to get Healing Ward on this build and really push the limits of how tanky I can be on this Warden. But right now I don't have it, so I'm just using Regeneration for a little bit of heal over time. It's really up to you. If you don't want to use Healing Ward or you don't have access to it, we've got some great green balance skills. Enchanted Growth is always an excellent option. It's also going to give you minor intellect and minor endurance, so if you want a little bit of recovery bonus as well as that burst heal when you need it, Enchanted Growth is also an awesome option, guys. The next ability we have is Blue Betty. We talked about this a little earlier. This is an excellent skill. This is going to give me major sorcery for 24 seconds. It's also going to give me my Necropotence buff for the 24 seconds, and it's going to restore 355 magicka over that period of time. So it's also free to cast, and it'll remove a negative effect. So this is like a free buff that will remove negative effects, and you can just cast it indefinitely as much as you want. Very, very powerful ability. I really like this skill, actually. I'm quite enjoying using the Betty Netch. I think it's very strong. And I really like how it works for Warden. It's really easy to get your Necropotence up because you don't have to double bar the Betty Netch. If you have it slotted on one bar, you can swap bars and it won't go away. So it's a very cool pet in that kind of sense. The next ability we have is Bird of Prey. This is one of your most important buffs for this build. It's going to give you major expedition and major endurance, so that's the stamina recovery and the movement speed. Both are very important, especially for PvP. You want to stay mobile. It helps a lot to stay mobile. And then finally, it also grants you minor berserk by 8 or for 10 seconds. So this will increase your outgoing damage by 8%. So this is a very strong buff. We see that we get 3 really useful and powerful buffs off of this Bird of Prey skill. The one downside to this ability, though, is that it is a 10-second buff, so it does not last very long, so you're going to have to recast it often. So like I've said in the past, guys, I don't like to play builds that have too terribly much buff management, so this is kind of pushing the limit of buff management that I'll play on a build. But the way that Warden functions, it's very bursty, so the buff casting doesn't end up being too detrimental to your gameplay. So let's move on to the next skill. So this is our defensive heal. So this is the one healing skill we're actually using for the Warden. Grow vines to embrace yourself and the lowest ally in front of you for 10 seconds. These vines heal the target for 2k health each time they take damage every 1 second. They will also apply minor lifesteal to enemies that damage the target, healing you and your allies for 600 health every 1 second when you damage that enemy. This is a really powerful ability. Fun fact, if I am low on HP and I put up a damage shield, and then I use Leeching Vines, if they damage my damage shield, it will heal me. So this essentially turns all of my damage shields into shields that heal me if you try to break them. So this is a really powerful heal for pretty much solo PvP, any kind of PvP or kind of fighting that you're doing where you got a lot of enemies attacking you, this heal is going to perform very, very well. And it's going to make your damage shields really, really powerful. So Leeching Vines coupled with Dampen Magic, and then finally Healing Ward once we unlock it, is going to give us an insane amount of survivability on this Warden, as well as an insane amount of healing power. And also another fun thing to note about the Leeching Vines skill is that it's a green balance skill. So it does get the Nature's Gift buff. When healing an ally with a green balance ability, you restore either 250 Magicka or 250 stamina. So the cost of this ability is actually completely nullified by the amount of resources it returns if people are attacking you when you use it. So it's a very good skill because when you use it correctly, it costs nothing, and it's very powerful, and it keeps you very alive. But if you don't use it correctly, it's a very short duration buff that can run you out of Magicka pretty quick if you keep casting it over and over. So as you can see, we have 2 of these 10-second buffs on this build. That's about as buff heavy as I like to get, guys. I've got the 25-second Betty Netch. Thank God that one's a nice long duration. But the 10-second buffs, these ones you almost always cycle in unison together. So I'll be like damage shield, and then I'll cycle these buffs, and then cast my Betty Netch as needed. And this keeps me fully buffed at all times. It makes me very defensible as long as I keep a damage shield up. So it works very well for this build. The final ability we have on this bar is Crystallized Slab. Now, we have 2 different kind of options for this ability here. We've got Crystallized Slab or the Shimmering Shield. The Crystallized Slab is going to shoot a frost projectile back at the target for each projectile that it absorbs. Whereas the Shimmering Shield morph is going to give me major heroism instead of dealing damage to my attacker. So I decided that since I'm a Magicka build and this scales off of your magic and frost damage, I'd go with the Crystallized Slab. This is really good for PvP because if someone hits you with like a crushing shock, it actually shoots 3 projectiles back at them. So you can actually like anti-burst someone really well by anticipating their offensive move, using the Crystallized Slab to return the damage back on them. So it's kind of your option which one you want to go with here. Because we're a Magicka Warden, the Crystallized Slab does quite a bit of damage on the Reflect, so it's a great option. Whereas if we were playing just a Stam Warden, I think Shimmering Shield would be the only really good option for this for that setup. So on this build, it's really up to you. If you want the Major Heroism, you can, but if not, go for the Crystallized Slab. I think it's a very powerful morph as well. Doesn't matter which one you pick. If you are returning projectiles or if you're absorbing them, you will be getting Magicka back as well. So just like the Leeching Vine skill, if you use this ability and it's actually used properly and reflects some attacks or absorbs them, then it's going to be almost free for you to use. Same with the Leeching Vine skill. And the nice part too is that this is 6 seconds on a reflect. Most of the reflects in the game that reflect more than 1 projectile are only about 4 seconds. So we're looking at UDK wings. So this is a nice long duration reflect, 6 seconds to keep that buff up on you. And then finally, guys, for the ultimate, we are running Healing Thicket. Now, the reason I've gone with Healing Thicket is just so I had a little bit more of group play utility. This is a very powerful heal. I would compare this to the Templar Healing Ultimate. Except I would say that Healing Thicket's almost a little bit better because after you cast it, you can continue attacking, whereas with the Templar Ultimate, you're just stuck channeling it. So there you have it. I actually really like this ultimate. It's come in real handy for kind of group stuff. Solo gameplay, I think I'm better off focusing more on using the Northern Storm. It's just a little better. Finally, the last thing to kind of mention about this ultimate is that it's really, really cheap. So if you decide to go for the Shimmering Shield for the alt gain, that you'll be able to spam the Healing Thicket like crazy on your healing bar. So there you have it. We actually have a very strong defensible healing bar as well as a very powerful offense bar on this build. So let's get into the CP, guys. Let's take a look at them.
Alright guys, so let's take a look at the champion points for the build. So in the tower tree, we've got 28 in Warlord and 18 in Sprinter. So the reason that I have my CP kind of decked out in kind of weird numbers here is because the actual value that your CP gives you rounds down to the nearest whole percent. So the way you put your CP in is you want to have it as close to the nearest whole percent as possible. So 10.15 is pretty good. 13.01 is pretty much perfect, right at that 13% mark. So that's something to keep in mind when you're placing your CP, guys. So we're going to go through them with that in mind. 28 in Break Free and 18 in Sprinter. We're going to have to break free in a fight. That's going to be a big part of our stamina costs. And then Sprinter is going to be a big part as well. We're going to have to move around a lot in PvP. We do have Major Expedition, and we're running well fitted, so sprinting is going to be a very viable option for this build. In the Lover Tree, we've got 64 in Arcanist, 43 in Mooncalf, and 15 in Tenacity. So 13% Magicka, 10% Stamina. recovery, and then 4% increased return on our light and heavy attack, or on our fully charged heavy attacks. So like I said, guys, we don't want to put too many points in one tree as we get some serious diminishing returns once we get past the 60 to 70 mark. The maximum amount of recovery you can get from this star is actually 15%. So at 64 points in, we're getting 13%. So very, very, very strong. Very good to not invest too many points into one single passive. As you can see, if we had dumped another 35 points in there, that would get us the last 2%, whereas the 35 points would get us well over 8% stamina recovery if we put them over here. So it's much better, I think, to kind of vary your CP. Obviously, focus on what you need, but vary your CP accordingly. In the Shadow Tree, we've got 26 in Tumbling and 16 in Shadow Ward. Roll Dodge, very important. We are running well fitted, so this is going to go well with that. And then finally, Shadow Ward, also important because we're going to have to block. It is PvP. Blocking is a part of how you play PvP, so this is going to be an important part of it. So there you have it. So occasionally, we're going to have to bust that block out, meaning that having these points here does not hurt. Okay, so let's take a look at our blue tree. To start with the Apprentice, we got 15 Blessed, 23 Elfborn, 27 Elemental Expert, and 25 Spell Erosion. As you can see that I don't have too terribly many points in here. They're just very well rounded in their trees. I've put 20 to 30 points in each one of these, making sure that I have the kind of biggest bonuses I can get out of each of these stars. And then finally, the 15 in Blessed for that healing power is awesome. In the Atronach tree, we got 59 Staff Expert and 61 Master at Arms. So we're coming in at 29% bonus damage to our light and heavy attacks. Very, very good. And then finally, 21% bonus damage to any of our direct damage attacks. So this is our light and heavy attacks and any of our abilities that aren't an AoE or damage over time. We're not running any dots on this build, so it's any of our abilities that aren't AoE. So a majority of the attacks we use on this build are going to get a benefit from the Master at Arms passive. The important kind of passive that we have in our blue tree is Spell Precision for that spell crit. We do have access to Tactician, so if we roll dodge, we set the enemy off balance. This is nice, but it's not a necessity. We don't really play too much into that. And then finally, nothing in the Ritual tree. In the Steed, guys, we've got 61 Ironclad, 5 Spell Shield, and 10 in Resistant. I just put a little bit in Spell Shield, Resistant, and Light Armor Focus, just for that front heavy, kind of giving me a little bit of that armor buff for putting very few points in. I'm getting about 100 armor per point that I put in, which is really good, so quite a bit of points coming out of that. And then finally, we've got 10 in Resistant, just for a little bit of crit resist. Like I said, this is predominantly a damage shield build. We're going to have our damage shields up pretty much all the time, but these come in handy for when those damage shields aren't up. Going to make us a little bit less squishy for investing very few points into it. We've got 61 in Ironclad. This is kind of our answer to the Master at Arms passive. So this is kind of increase your damage at direct damage effects at 61, and then reduce the incoming damage you take from direct damage effects. So 61 points as well to get us that 21% reduced incoming damage. This is great, especially for PvP. Most burst attacks or bursty builds are going to be hitting you with single target damage abilities. So this is awesome to mitigate that incoming damage, especially from single target abilities. Not to mention, this is going to reduce the amount of damage your damage shields take too. So it's a very strong passive, and we're doing a lot of damage shield work. So there you have it. In our next tree, I've got 15 in Hardy, 15 in Elemental Defender, and 16 in Thick Skinned. Of course, the 5 from Light Armor Focus. I have these points also very well varied. I didn't want to focus too much on any particular defensive avenue like physical or magic attacks. Make sure it's well-rounded, that I get the most out of my points that I put in it. As you can see, it's only 4.2% for each. It's not a lot, but it's not terrible either. The 7.4 on the crit damage is nice too. And then finally, guys, we've got 66 in Bastion and 15 Quick Recovery, 2 Elemental Defender. 66 in Bastion for that 22% bigger damage shield. I mean, absolutely incredible. I wouldn't recommend putting much over 66%. You have to get into the 70s. I think it's 71 points in Bastion in order to get to the 23%. So I would recommend that 66 is actually pretty ideal. Even if you don't want to put this many points in, it's okay too. This is just going to make sure that our damage shields are really big. Like you guys saw with the build, our damage shields are very important for our defense and our healing, so we need to have very big ones. So there you go. The 15 in quick recovery, just a little bit of a healing bonus. Like I said, we don't focus too much on healing in this build. We have mostly passive heals except for healing wards, so that's where a lot of our healing is just going to come from using a damage shield. And then 2 in expert defender, just for the 1% reducing. Okay, guys, let's jump into that PvP commentary. So let's begin. As you can see, we just quickly kill this guy off of his horse. He goes in for the crit rush, but by the time he's already on his way to us, he's almost dead. So I quickly just buff up. As I said, guys, there's only 10 seconds on those 2 buffs, so you have to recast them quite often. I see this guy coming up the stairs. I cast my Subterranean Assault so that he takes the stun. There you see it. Takes a big stun off my heavy attack, and I just finish him off with a quick little poke into Crushing Shock. I drop another Subterranean Assault on this guy while I go into my ultimate, and he doesn't actually eat the stun. He does take damage from it, but he doesn't eat the stun. So, of course, as you can see, like the basic offensive rotation we're doing here, we start with the Subterranean Assault. We're going to follow it with a Cliff Racer into the Crushing Shock. Now, sometimes I'll just do a heavy attack, and I won't do the Cliff Racer, so I'll just do a Subterranean Assault heavy attack into the power or Crushing Shock. So it's really up to you guys how you want to kind of drop the combos. I would say play around with the different abilities you have and see how you like them. You see there, I get a beefy Subterranean on all of these guys here. They take a lot of damage. I got another EP player with me. He's on a Magicka DK, very tanky. He manages to finish off one of the guys that we put a lot of burst into there. I go for another sub-assault. I do a lot of damage to this Warden, but he's just pounding the heals on himself. He takes another huge burst from my Subterranean Assault. I'm trying to keep the pressure on him, but there's a lot of healing power going out for these enemy players here. And here you can just really see the damage shield doing its work. As my damage shield gets melted away, it's making sure that any health that I lose is getting healed up very fast. Here you see my health drop, and we're going to see Sort come around the corner, and look how he's attacking me, and all he's doing is healing me. He's trying so hard to break that damage shield. I'm very low on Magicka here. I get the Subterranean Assault into a heavy attack with my ultimate up and drop both those guys with the combo. So much burst damage, so much AoE off this Warden, and there you see it just really working to its full extent there. I come back up the stairs here to try to pick a fight with the rest of these guys. There are quite a few blues here, so I'm very low on Magicka here as well. I want to kind of play it easy with my resources. I am running tripods, so I can roll a lot. The big beauty of running tripods on this build, you get so much opportunity to roll. So I buff up around the corner, coming up with the EP player, and I kind of push into these guys, making sure I keep my Subterranean Assault up. You see we get a really good burst off on the guy on the oil there, and I managed to drop him. I go for the healing ultimate because I don't have enough ult for the Frost Storm, but the healing ult manages to give me the healing I need to kind of pull out of there, and we'll move on to the next clip. Okay, so in this keep here, it's a little bit of a Zergy fight. We're in a keep here trying to stop the blues from taking it. So we're going to do our best here. You see I take a lot of focus around the corner. I pull a lot of blues with me. After wrapping around the corner, I quickly work my way back. Nobody really focuses on me. They all kind of go back into their group. So you can see here I'm charging up my Subterranean Assault, and as soon as it's about to go off, I just peek my head around the corner, making sure I can put a lot of AoE pressure into those guys. This guy crit rushes into me. I get him with a really good sub-assault and a second one that lines up and actually finishes him off and another player. So much AoE damage. Here we see the full combo. We went for the Cliff Racer into the sub-assault. Hit him really hard, but he did take a heal from the Templar there as well. So here we go right back around the corner. Keep our buffs up. Manage those buffs. Something to keep in mind, I am running the Resto Staff and trying to take advantage of those Resto Heavies to get my resources back, but I do not have my Resto Staff passive, so it's very hard for me to return as much resources as I would normally if I had 50 Resto. As you can see, they don't really chase us up the stairs. We got a few EP players there as well. They start rezzing the guys I killed, and I'm a little bit hesitant to push into them as I'm pretty low on Magicka here right away, and there's quite a few blue players. I'm just trying to get their attention to pull them up the stairs into a place where maybe they will be not so safe. Here you see the guy takes a beefy Subterranean Assault. I do the Cliff Racer into the Shock. He does take quite a big heal though from something, so I'm not able to bring this guy down. He's got a lot of healing power on him. He decides to back his way out as well. I'm going to work my way into the middle here. I've got my I've got my Northern Storm up. I go for the Subterranean Assault. As I push in, you see they take the huge burst from the Sub-Assault. I get 2 really quick kills. I've got a few EP players up top as well, raining down on these guys, so they're going to keep the pressure on these guys while I try to get out of here. You see I do a quick roll behind here. I've got the damage shield up. My living vines doing excellent work. You see there's one full damage shield that guy burnt through, and it almost full health healed me from half HP just for him to burn through the damage shield. So a lot of healing coming out of that cutting out of that Living Vines ability. I keep my Reflect up, of course, coming around the corner. I was expecting some projectiles from this guy, but he ended up not throwing them, so I ended up wasting the Magicka on that Reflect. That's something that I personally don't do so well on my Warden, is I don't manage my Reflect very well. But, you know, that's all coming with time. You just got to keep playing the build. This guy goes back up to the top here. We've got a few guys trying to push into EP up here. I go for the burst on this guy there. You see he takes a massive amount of damage, not just from me, but from the other EP players as well. I go for the drop down here to a jump down to make sure we capitalize on the kill. I also want to kind of try to get back to holding our ground down here. As I come around the corner, I realize, oh no, this is no longer our keep, so I move as fast as I can, trying to cycle my buffs, and I take a little bit too much burst there as I come around the corner. Should have gone for maybe a Reflect into the damage shield, and I would have survived. Anyhow, guys, let's move on to the next clip. All right, so let's see what we got here. We're going to be at this resource here. We got quite a few blues coming at me. 2 of them ride by. They don't even really notice me. So what I got to do here is, first of all, I'm going to get around my corner, set up my Subterranean Assault. There you see the full combo into him. He keeps his block up. Through his block, I hit him for so much damage with that combo. I decide, since there's 2 of them, I'll go into my Northern Storm. I get an awesome Subterranean burst into a couple Cliff Divers, or Cliff Racers on that guy and drop him. Here you see a Templar spamming the Radiant on me. The Radiant's actually just going to feed my Leeching Vines as long as I keep my damage shield up. So Radiant isn't actually a very good way to kill a Warden, especially if they're playing their build correctly. So there you see it going. He's not going to have a lot of effect with that. I'm running a little low on Magicka. I go for a few heavy attacks on these guys as I pull out. Make sure that I've got my Betting Etch up as well. Trying to keep my Leeching Vines up too, because it's very important. You see it's just healing away my HP. Any damage that I take gets healed away very quickly from the Leeching Vines. So now I've got the 3 players on me. I decide that I've got to do a little bit of a peel across this bridge. My stamina is very low here. I managed to get the potion just in time. If I had taken a stun there, that could have been the end of the fight. I go to the bottom of the bridge. I activate the Subterranean Assault, waiting for one of these guys to follow me up. Nobody does, so I go for the second Sub-Assault. I managed to get a good stun on this DK here. He retaliates with the Dragon Leap right away. Good call. And then I just kind of like heavy attack him a bit. Just trying to keep my Magicka up as well. A Nightblade comes in. I know the Nightblade's going to be very squishy. The first thing I do is I make him eat the Sub-Assault into the Screaming Cliff Racer, and I have the ultimate up. He just melts as soon as he enters that fight, and I'm just left to fight this DK. And as you can see here, his damage is not that great at all. If I just put a shield up, put my damage shield up, and then use my Leeching Vines, he is never going to kill me. So I just kind of use him to get a little bit of max Magicka back. He's going to keep retreating back to the resource, but once I'm satisfied with the amount of Magicka I've returned, here we go for the Sub-Assault into the Screaming Cliff Racer, and then the Crushing Shock to bring him down. Sorry, the Force Pulse to bring him down. And last but not least, guys, this is the final clip of the evening. Here we are by ourselves on a blue resource. It's just about to flip blue, so I want to push in on these guys. I show myself, peek behind the corner so I can get a good Subterranean Assault off. I don't actually hit many with the first one, but I'm making sure that every 3 seconds I recast that Subterranean Assault. This is my most powerful AoE ability. You see that in the Frost Storm, I managed to nuke one of the guys down. He's going for the res on his buddy there. I'm going to try to keep them from resing as well. Keeping the Subterranean Assaults up. These guys do not have a healer in their group, so there you see the second Subterranean Assault, a couple Force Pulses with a dodge roll to take that guy down. I get caught with my stamina down, but at least I have the damage shield up as well as the Leeching Vines, so I do manage to survive laying on the ground there. I do a quick retreat back here now that the resource is flipped blue. I really don't want to pull guards on top of all these enemy players, so I peek back around this corner. This is very, I think this is really Magicka Warden-esque gameplay, as you can see, kind of using these corners to set your burst, and here you can see I line up an awesome burst on this guy here and just drop him. He goes down so fast. Trying to make sure that I keep the pressure on these guys there. There's one guy in the back. He's very low HP. I don't want to give him a chance to get back up too easily. I go for my ultimate again here. It says doing so much damage to this guy. He's not even healing himself, so it's really easy kill on him. So then I'm just left with, I think, 3 of them around me. There's only the 3 of them left. I'm just kind of heavy attacking them here. I do have my Reflect as well if I really need it, but between my Leeching Vines and my Dampen Magic, I really don't feel like these guys are going to be putting enough pressure into me. Well, the Sork goes into her Destro Wall. Interestingly enough, to res her friend. I think she's trying to make herself look really unappealing for the res. Another friendly player comes in here on my team. He ended up killing one of the blues there while I'm fighting this Sork. They're going for the reses on their buddies here. All right, guys, so I'm just going to let you enjoy the rest of the fight here. It ends up, well, with EP zerging these fools down. Typical EP. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to hit that follow button. Give the video a like, too, if you guys really liked it. I know that Warden is a relatively new class, so there's not a lot of builds out there for it yet. I really hope you guys like this build. I've had a lot of fun playing it, and I really feel like you guys will enjoy it, too. It's very strong. It's pretty easy to pick up, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm really liking the Warden class, so I really hope you guys are enjoying it as well. If you guys want to catch me live, feel free to check me out on Twitch. It's JackDanielESO. As always, guys, if you want links to any of that kind of stuff, it is in the description of the video. And have a nice day. I'll see you next time.